evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in a corridor immediately to your right, and please go outside and stand at assembly point 9. The Democratic Services Officer present will assist you. On arriving at the meeting, you should have read the emergency evacuation procedure and signed the fire register, and please inform Democratic Services if you have not done so. Number 2, mobile phones off or silent. Number 3, members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after the application they're interested in has been debated, you're very welcome to do so by the front door reception the way you came in, but please do so quietly and without conversing with any members of the committee. And then fourthly, when the meeting is ended, I'll ask for confirmation the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the virtual meeting if you're joining remotely and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. And just a reminder, those members joining us should have their cameras off and be unmuted and be muted unless they're speaking. Okay, so final point, I'll refer to that in a second. This is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. And I ask that members of the public, both those attending in person and those attending virtually, ensure they do not shout out or disrupt the committee's deliberation outside of those who register to speak in their allocated slots. And I would also ask, we've got quite a large number of members of the public here, you're very welcome, but if you mumble, the camera swoops straight to you, so please try and avoid doing that as well, obviously when you're speaking in slots, but occasionally cameras kind of swing towards members of the public who come there, so please try not to speak during our deliberations. Great, that's my chair's announcement. So now number 2, apologies for absence. Matthew, have you got any apologies this evening?
Yes, Joe, we've had apologies from Councillor Mike Pickles and Councillor Val Shaw.
Thank you very much. And would you mind taking your register?
Of course. Councillor Ron Batstone.
Present.
Councillor Jenny Hannity.
Present.
Councillor Scott Bolton.
Present.
Councillor Sarah James.
Present.
Councillor Robert Madison.
Present.
Councillor Jill Rayner.
Present.
Councillor Max Thompson.
Present. Thank you very much. I now turn to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of our last meeting on the 25th of March 2026. Can I accept those as a correct record? And if so, can I have a motion? Councillor Horton.
I move that we accept them.
And a seconder, Councillor Hannaby. Thank you. In that case, all those who are in agreement. Okay, that's unanimous. Great. I will sign those at the end of the meeting. Agenda item 4 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations? Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. On item 8, I'm the ward councillor, so I'll be stepping down from the table and I'll be speaking on that motion.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 is urgent business. And Natasha, have we got any urgent business this evening?
Nothing urgent.
Okay, perfect. And then just for me to say, we get into our 4 items this evening. We have a large number of speakers registered on each of the items this evening. I fully intend to get through all of these agenda items before the end of the meeting. So I would just remind members of the committee to keep their questions as concise as they can, as relevant to the application, and also when we move into debate, to try and keep it as concise and as relevant as possible so we get through all 4 items before we're timed up at 9:30. I don't anticipate getting there, but I thought I would just flag that at this stage. With that, I move on to the first of the 4 items we're considering this evening, which is 5 Lydiard's Row. I may have mispronounced that, and Natalie, I believe you're presenting on this one.
Good evening. My name is Natalie Power, and I'm the case officer for this planning application. This is a householder application proposing the dismantling of an existing corrugated shed and the construction of a detached outbuilding hosting a home office, WC, and kitchenette. I would like to draw Council's attention to an error within paragraph 7.29 on page 27 of your agenda report packs, where reference is made to the diameter of significant tree roots to be avoided during the works. The diameter measurement should read 25 millimetres as annotated on the submitted plan, not 2 millimetres. The application site hosts 5 Lydiard's Row, a terraced house located within the residential area of Barrington. The site does not benefit from a vehicular access, with all of the dwellings along Lydiard's Row accessed via a shared private pedestrian path from Southampton Street to the west. Here is a proposed site plan and an aerial image of the immediate area. Lydiard's Row sees all of the main gardens for the properties located to the front of the terraced dwellings. This plot is long and linear and skewed and angled, seeing the majority of number 5's garden located to the front of number 4 Lydiard's Row. Many of the gardens host their own structures and outbuildings, all of varying sizes. These houses are not listed and are not located within a conservation area. The proposed outbuilding is marked with a red star on the site plan. Here are the proposed elevation plans. The timber-clad outbuilding is to host a pitched roof reusing corrugated metal from the dismantled shed with solar panels on the rear southern elevation. The building is to measure approximately 3.8 metres tall with an overall width of 4 metres and a depth of 4.5 metres, including the battery stored for the solar panels. Here is the proposed floor plan. This application is for a single-storey outbuilding which is proposed to host a home office, WC, a small kitchenette, and an external battery store for the solar panels. Here are some photographs of the application site. This is the view from Southampton Street, approaching the entrance to Lydiard's Row from the north. I also include a photograph of the pedestrian access gate. This is the initial view along the shared pedestrian path of Lydiard's Row. The terraces can be seen on the left and the gardens on the right. The first garden to the immediate right is currently enclosed with fencing. Moving towards the site, we can see that the neighbouring gardens to the right are initially open in appearance, with lawn fronting the path. Smaller fences and outbuildings are positioned further back. I've indicated on the photograph where number 5's existing shed is located with a red arrow. This is a photograph of the initial section number 5's garden, adjacent to the shared pedestrian path. The shape of the existing outbuilding is outlined in ivy. I've indicated this with a red arrow. This is a photograph. These are some older photographs of the existing shed. The corrugated metal can be seen, with the existing outbuilding hosting windows and a door on its front and side elevations. This is the rear of the outbuilding taken from within the applicant's garden. And this is a photo standing next to the existing outbuilding and looking directly back towards the terrace. The house directly ahead with the green door is number 4 Lydiard's Row. The applicant's house is to the right with the white front door. The existing outbuilding can be seen on the right-hand side. Moving further east along Lydiard's Row, this is a view of the site looking back towards Southampton Street. A neighbouring outbuilding can be seen on the left-hand side, alongside some examples of how some of the other gardens have been enclosed in comparison to the initially quite open gardens. Here are extracts of all the proposed plans together. The county archaeologist, heritage officer and forestry officers have raised no objections to the proposal. For the reasons outlined within the committee reports, it is officer's recommendation that this household proposal be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Natalie. I will challenge you to questions what we've heard from our speakers. So we have 4 speakers in this application. The first is Councillor Jane Bolton, a representative of Farringdon Town Council. Councillor Bolton, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. You'll have 3 minutes when you're ready, and you'll get a 30-second warning as well. So please, whenever you're ready.
Right. I'm objecting on behalf of Farringdon Town Council and as a previous resident of Lydiard's Row. I'm repeating the concerns of the current residents and of the Town Council. Lydiard's Row is a row of 12 small terrace cottages with a communal garden enclosed by a high stone wall. It's nicknamed locally as the Secret Garden. Although the cottage is not listed and is not in the conservation area, it does have a unique quality to it and is in an historic setting as discussed by the Heritage Officer at point 7.8 of the report. For historic reasons, one cottage has no garden and most of the others are therefore offset, so they are mainly in front of their next door neighbours. In the case of number 5, their garden is mainly in front of number 4. The council and residents consider the proposed building is dominant, large, permanent and totally out of keeping with the row. If the application is approved, it would create an overdevelopment in a garden setting and could cause an unwanted precedent that would totally change the character and amenity of this uniquely beautiful row of cottages. That's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Bolton. I'll just see if there are any questions or clarification for you from the committee.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for your time, Councillor Bolton. And I'll now move on to our next 2 speakers. Apologies if I get the names mispronounced. It's Marion Costley and Claire Bowley, who are both speaking objection. Lead ahead.
Good evening, Chair, councillors.
Good evening. And where's everyone else? You'll have 3 minutes when you're ready and you get 30 seconds at the end. There might be some questions for you after. So
thank you so much. My name is Marion and I live at 8 Lydiard's Road, and I'm here with Claire from number 4 to speak on behalf of the majority of our fellow residents of Lydiard's Road. Throughout 4 consultations, objections have remained consistently high, with 13 objections maintained at the final consultation alongside repeated objections from the Farringdon Town Council. The key issue before committee members is the impact of this proposal on neighbouring residents and the communal character of Lydiard's Row. The report correctly notes that the garden of number 5 is unusually skewed in its layout and that much of it sits in front of number 4. Although the building would be located within the applicant's garden, it would be most apparent from number 4, where it would sit directly in front of the front door, lounge window and bedroom window of that property. The report also accepts that the proposed building will be directly visible from the front window of number 4. This proposal would affect more than a single neighbouring property. The shared communal path runs directly through the frontage of Lydiard's Row and is used daily by residents throughout the row. The proposed building would form a dominant feature within that communal space and would create a significant visual change to the open nature of the gardens, not just number 4. At the point where the building is proposed, the garden is only around 5 metres wide. Within that space, the proposed building would be approximately 4 metres wide and approaching 3.8 metres high. It would sit directly against one boundary and only 1 metre from the other, occupying most of the available width of the plot. This impact would be experienced not only from number 4, but also all residents using the communal path and the wide frontage of Lydiard's Row. The existing corrugated building, which the report places considerable weight on, is approximately 2 metres high, but the proposed building would be nearly double in height. Residents also drew comparison with the office at number 7 Lydiard's Row, which is approximately 3.2 metres high, sits further back and is opposite the house it relates to and served only by electricity. By contrast, this application sees a taller and much larger building and incorporates a WC, kitchenette, solar installation and battery storage, creating a far more intensive form of development. The question for members is not whether an outbuilding can exist within the site. Outbuildings already exist in the row. The question is whether a building of this scale, size, height and prominence is appropriate within a narrow communal frontage directly in front of a neighbouring home and experienced by residents throughout Lydiard's Row. For these reasons and the Vale's own core policies that this contravenes, as noted by the professional planning consultant we engaged, we respectfully ask members to refuse this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That's bang on 3 minutes. I'll just ask if any members of the committee have any questions, clarification for either of you. I can't see any, and I'll confirm, of course, that we did undertake a site visit as well, so I should have said at the start, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I now turn to our final speaker on this application, Councillor Bethia Thomas, ward member. Councillor Thomas, are you there?
I am. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Please, well, whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members, for allowing me to speak on this application. I was very happy to be able to join some of you yesterday at the site visit in Farringdon. It reminded me of the layout of the site and I'm sure gave you a better idea of how this application could impact the residents in this area. Lydiard's Row is a unique setting in Farringdon and neighbours live side by side in close proximity to each other. Alterations and additions to one property clearly affect the outlook and aspect of neighbouring properties. It is particularly the case when you consider this application. As we saw yesterday, the garden in which the outbuilding would be situated sits outside the neighbouring property. The garden of number 5 Lydiard's Row is where you would expect the garden of number 4 to be. It sounds strange, but it has worked for many years, even with the inclusion of outbuildings in many of the gardens in the row. The gardens, while narrow, are very deep, and there are several outbuildings set further back than the one that is currently being proposed, and are of much more modest scale and design. Many of the existing outbuildings are unassuming and do not overlook neighbouring properties. The design proposed in this application is almost double the height of the existing outbuilding, takes up virtually the entire width of the garden, and is set further forward, only metres from the frontage of the neighbouring property at number 4 Lydiard's Row. I can understand the occupants' concerns that the outbuilding would impose on their frontage and overlook the front rooms of their house. The suggested design of this outbuilding includes many features not generally included in a traditional outbuilding, with a kitchen area and washroom, which I find an unusual necessity given that it is only a few metres from the property that it is designed to serve. I've been following this application for many months now, as has my ward colleague, Councillor Lucy Edwards, to understand the concerns of residents. As has been suggested already, I think the question here is not whether an outbuilding should be included in the garden design, but whether the size, scale and location of this outbuilding is appropriate for the setting. In this case, I believe it is not, and I urge members of the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. I guess I'll just see if there are any questions or clarifications. Can't see any. So I'll say thank you very much to all our speakers on this application. I now open the floor to questions for our officer. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Horton?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this has come in as a planning application, and a lot of outbuildings are built purely using permitted development rights. Can you just clarify what part of the application makes it so that it doesn't count as permitted development?
Yes, 3 main points. The building itself would be located forward the principal elevation of the dwelling, so under Class C, that requires planning permission. Also, the height of the building, because it's within 2 metres of a boundary and measures 3.8 metres, that's over 2.5, it would require planning permission. And also because the building is not truly incidental, so it has a loo and it has a kitchenette, so that would not come under Class E.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for our officer? If there are no further questions, I'm going to request a motion on this application. Would someone like to put forward a motion on this application? Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened with interest to everything that's been said. I would propose that we reject the application on the basis of size, scale and overlooking.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Rain. Okay, we have a motion to refuse the application. I open the floor to debate. I mean, I can say something on this. I went on the site visit. I agree, and I'll be supporting this motion to refuse the application. I think it's out of character. The design is an overbearing presence, and I think it has a significant negative impact on residential amenity. So I think I believe I'm pressing Development Policy 23 and Core Policy 7. I don't think it meets those from my perspective. I'm going to be on site visit, so I will be refusing on that basis. Councillor Rain.
The site visit was so helpful. I don't think when you look at the plans, it actually reflects how incredible that little area is. And yeah, I agree entirely. It will dominate massively, and I think it will affect people's well-being and their everyday existence and change that it should be.
Yes, I thought the visit was extremely helpful. We're looking at the character and design, and I walked to right to the end of Lydiard, and I did notice that there were different structures at different sizes, but further down, as the Councillor Tom said, further on down, which didn't seem to have that intrusion. There can be something put there, there's no doubt about it. But I just believe that the scale and size of it is just too overpowering and neighbourly, really. I would think, obviously all the neighbours and that get on together, and it was a lovely area, etc. I just feel that something can go there, but I just feel that with the size and then the roof, etc., it will be overbearing.
I think that's when we got the tape measure out, actually, it was just, it was quite significant.
Yes, we had a really good look at it, and I think we had a fair look, etc.
And of course, we understand it's an unbalanced decision. I fully accept the recommendation in the report as grounded. But again, I think I'll be pushing to refuse. Is there
I note the officer's recommendation, but we're here to look. We looked at it. And yes, it could go there probably, but I think it isn't appropriate in this area, although it's not a conservation area with conservation but not listed buildings, etc. But
So I'm going to suggest we move to a vote on this if no one has anything further to say. I think we have the grounds on which the motion has been supported. We're clear on those. So those in favour of the motion to refuse this application. I believe that's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thanks for your speakers. Thank you, Natalie. And now we're going to move on to our next application, which is 28 Ancient Road. For those who are heading out, you can say quietly. Thank you so much. So 28 Ancient Road, and I believe Catherine, you're presenting this. Thank you so much. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. The next application to be considered is the change of use of the dwelling house in an 11-bed HMO with single and two-storey extensions to facilitate the change of use. The application also includes turning the rear garden into a gravel car park with 5 spaces and removal of part of the wall onto Allington Close to create a second access. The application follows a series of household approvals for extensions to the dwelling. For clarification, these have not been implemented. The extensions that have already been built are directly connected to the HMO use and are therefore retrospective, but fall for consideration under the current application. Just turning to what you can see on the screen, the site fronts onto Ensham Road here with front gardens here along with neighbouring 3 properties. There's a bus stop close by, close to where this tree is. And the site backs onto Allington Close here, which loops around back onto Ensham Road. Adjacent properties have vehicular access from Allington Close, but they also use part of this space as private rear gardens. And this is the only vehicular access to these properties. I'm going to work through the following slides to show various points. So this shows the original dwelling and the original footprint of the 3-bed dwelling with garage space. This shows the dwelling as built out and as shown on proposed plans, which form part of the application, and the HMO layout for 11 individuals. This is the front of the property facing onto Ensham Road. And then the rear of the property with parking area and new access as built out. This clarifies the existing rear access and then the proposed second access to facilitate creation of 5 parking spaces. A small outdoor community space is just, there's a small courtyard in this corner. Here is the kitchen area. These are photos taken from Rightmove. And an example of one of the bedrooms. This is the view of the site several months ago as it was being built. And here's the access to the property within the turning head. This gives the idea of the extensions that are being considered after this application. This shows the side of the property with the courtyard on the side and then the other side adjacent to number 30. This gives an idea of the parking arrangements and accesses within the close, with other access points on this edge. And then the front facing onto Ensham Road. The main concerns raised during the consultation process relate to increased comings and goings from 11 individuals and risk to children playing in the close, overspill of parking and congestion in the close, increased traffic having to travel from Ensham Road through narrow residential streets, quality of living for HMO residents and neighbours within the close, overly small rooms and lack of communal space, over concentration of HMOs, impact on character of the close as a result of the sizable extensions and opening up another rear access, and insufficient outdoor amenity space. The technical matters have been set out in detail in the committee report. There were no objections from highways officers or the environmental protection team in terms of volume of traffic, highway safety or parking, or noise or disturbance. The main consideration is intensification of use. 11 individuals are significantly more than the dwelling could house, so that would be 4 bedrooms under the extended permission. Officers have carried out research on this matter and drawn from inspectors' conclusions. These have been clear that typically there is no high level of disturbance or noise in the case of an HMO. It is dependent on individual residents living there. Noise or disturbance relating to an individual is managed under separate legislation, not planning legislation. Officers therefore advise that to refuse the application on these grounds would be taking a different view to established case law. Over concentration of HMOs has been raised as an issue, and specifically risk of changing the character of a quiet residential area. A good number of cases have been highlighted in the local area through the consultation. However, these relate to dwellings converted to HMOs using permitted development rights, so that would be a maximum of 6 individuals, or multi-generational living in a dwelling, or conversion/extension of a dwelling to form flats. All these are different cases to what's being considered here, whether they're permitted development and couldn't be controlled under any HMO policy, threshold policy, or they're not HMOs and any extensions or parking considerations would be considered as part of the planning application under their own merits. Separate to this, there are no local plan or neighbourhood plan policies that restrict the number of large HMOs in a particular area, and it would therefore be difficult to demonstrate a conflict with policy simply on over-concentration. Having checked our records, there does not appear to be an over-concentration of large HMOs in the immediate area, and there is no policy threshold that could be factored into a decision in any case. To conclude, Section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 requires all planning applications to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Taking into consideration case law on large HMOs and development plan policies, a planning conflict cannot be demonstrated. On this basis, the officer recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions. I pass back to planning committee to consider the application in more detail.
Thanks, Catherine. We'll return to you for some questions once we've heard from our speakers. We have 4 speakers on this application. The first is Councillor Judy Roberts, who's speaking as a representative from the Parish Council this evening. Good evening, Councillor Roberts. You know the drill. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready, and you've got a 30-second warning, please.
Thank you for letting me speak to you all tonight. I won't go into overdevelopment and intensification, as that will be dealt with by other people. But I think there are still several outstanding problems that warrant refusal for this application. I would like to reiterate the condition 5 and the stipulation in Appendix 1 for marked hard standing. That's as you saw in the photos. At the moment it's gravel. There's no way you can enforce the tracking on that. I would like to add to the officer's comment 7.28 that there are frequently overspill parked cars in the turning area and that road has no parking restrictions. If the access is blocked to either dropped curb site, it will cause further overspill. And again, you saw in the photos how many parked cars there are actually there already. The highways removed their objection on excessive use of the cul-de-sac because they couldn't prove severe harm, just rather harm. I would add that there are 2 popular bus stops at the access point onto Hensham Road, where there's a 10-minute bus service actually crosses, frequently blocking the access to Deanfield Road, especially during peak times. I would also contest the use of the front green space for amenity use, as in the refusal of one of the designs for number 40 Hensham Road, which is at the other side of the development. They stated that the green spaces at the front of 28 to 42 is an integral part of the street scene, and that was one of the reasons for refusal of that particular design. There is also a cycle track planned from Botley to Hensham Road, Bike Safe, you may have heard of it, and that is designed and has been feasibility studies and runs right the way across the frontages of these properties. This leaves the rear amenity space as insufficient, as is stated by the officer's comment in 7.23, not meeting 4.15 of the joint design guide. My last point, well, the one point is that the room sizes are very small and they're all only just between 2 and 4 square metres over the minimum required. And none of them are big enough for 2 people. And one of the smallest rooms has to share a shower room with one of the other dwellings. My last point is that the Southern Vale HMO Standards Document 2024, for HMOs of 11 or more, there should be 3 sets of kitchen facilities. It also states that there should be work surfaces both sides of the oven. This means that the kitchen spaces require a complete redesign to be able to incorporate that. This is an on-balance decision, and my conclusion is that there are too many problems outstanding. You have highways problems, insufficient amenity space, incorrect kitchen design, and it should be refused, or at the very least deferred while the alterations that are required are carried out, rather than as currently the case.
If you could wrap up quickly, that would be
great. Rather than as currently the case, advertised is for occupation now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roberts. I'll just check if there are any questions or clarification. I'll see anything. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I now move to our second speaker on this application, which is Glenn Gibney, who's speaking objection. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. You're ready? 30 seconds.
Right. My name is Glenn Gibney. I am one of the residents of Arlington Close directly affected by this application, which the planning officer has acknowledged is, in substance, an attempt to regularise work already carried out to convert and operate this property as a house in multiple occupation. Experienced developers have at each stage misdirected the planning process through incremental works, misleading submissions, and deliberate obfuscation until a final change of use application can be presented as a near fait accompli. Residents should have had the opportunity at the outset to consider whether this property could or should be converted to a HMO, to debate its scale, its impact on amenity, and its relationship to the surrounding community. Instead, we find ourselves at the final stage, apparently with little recourse. We're not NIMBYs. We want to be clear about who we are and what we are asking. Arlington Close already contains a number of HMOs and short-term lets. We accept the role of mixed housing tenure in meeting local need. We recognise that Oxford growth and its expensive rental market create genuine demand for shared occupation. We are not opposed to HMOs in principle. What we are opposed to is the systematic and unchecked concentration of such properties in a single residential street. Without the licensing controls that apply in Oxford City Council areas, that regulatory gap means that smaller HMOs and short-term lets already in this street are effectively invisible to the planning process. creating significant and unfair advantage for developers who understand how to exploit it. If this application is approved without meaningful restriction, the planning officer's own comments that there are no policy mechanisms to limit the number of HMOs in this location, it will serve as an open invitation to further development of this kind. To know that the impact is significant, proposed development add approximately 10 new residences to a small cul-de-sac with no through road. We believe that within the 18 immediate surrounding properties, existing HMOs and short-term lets have already added an approximately 12 additional residents above the baseline residential figure. This application would therefore increase the effective residential population to approximately 40 residences within a single small close. The level of density has not been adequately addressed in the planning officer's report, and we respectfully submit that it should be. What the report has also overlooked is that Arlington Close is a living community. It's a home to young families, long-term residents, and children who play safely in the street. 30 seconds. A cul-de-sac environment makes it well suited to the kind of neighbourhood life. Planning officer's report makes no meaningful reference to the impact on families and children. What we asked the committee to consider is that having set out objections in previous submissions, which we trust members have reviewed, we respectfully ask the committee to refuse or minimum substantially reduce this application in its current form, to set a clear signal that this community's character and residents' quality of life matter in this process. And so doing, we ask that the committee weigh in the following decisions: the manner in which the developments are involved in the process warrants greater scrutiny.
I'm afraid you're out of time, so you could wrap up very quickly.
Okay. Impact on the character of cohesion, the scale of design of the building, lack of loss of residential community, and the cumulative concentration of HMO type accommodation in the immediate area.
Thank you very much. I'll see if there are any questions of clarification from the committee.
Well, I'd just like to ask a little bit more about the parking in the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
So we saw quite a bit of parking. Is there more than what we saw?
It varies from time to time. Because we've got 2 HMOs at numbers 4 and 8. They will have various number of residences. Again, number 30 Deanfield Road, which is just immediately around the corner, again has, I think it's 6 residents at the moment. So they have various number of cars come and go. There are Airbnbs at number 14 at Deanfield and number 27 Deanfield and 14 Arlington Close. So they all have different comings and goings. So last night there was 3 vans outside the Deanfield one. There's 2 outside the Arlington Close one. These all overspill onto that road. Yeah. So what we get to the bit, which is the supposed 5 spaces for the 11 residences, as will be, there's nothing in the thing that says that they cannot have additional vehicles. In fact, I think one of the neighbours spotted on Rightmove today that's it's on Ox Living's own site. It says on-street parking available.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I'll just say thank you very much for your time this evening, Mr. Gibney. I will now call on our next speaker, Neil Simpson, who's speaking in support of the application. I believe you're joining us virtually. Mr. Simpson, are you there?
I am. Good evening, Chair.
As with everyone else, you have 3 minutes and you're with a 30-second warning. So please, whenever you're ready.
Good evening to the committee. Thank you and members of the public, members of the planning team. I appreciate your time this evening to discuss this. We've heard a lot about the issues of Arlington Close. The applicant has worked for the last 6 months with Oxfordshire Highways to find a solution that would avoid what is an existing issue. The applicant and Highways are all too aware that there are issues, but these are existing issues and they should be addressed by Highways with an approach such as parking restrictions, not as part of this planning application. To my mind, creating the access on the Hammerhead should stop parking there, which would obviously obstruct or does obstruct cars and bin lorries turning. So there should be an improvement, arguably. The fact that all of the allocated parking for the property is on site should ensure that the scheme, if approved, does not contribute any further to the issues that are already existing in Arlington Close. The councillor and the planning officer brought attention to the fact that there is a bus stop with 10-minute buses serving the routes into Oxford City. This is one of the reasons why this is a highly sustainable location. We've included sufficient bike racks or bike stores for all of the residents if they wish. The whole concept is to get people out of their cars as far as possible. We appreciate some people love their cars, and it's a slow process. But in terms of this property, it is in a highly sustainable location. This was highlighted by the planning officer. And if there is scope to minimise car use, this is it. This is ideal. To summarise, the application is policy compliant, as noted by the officer in their recommendation. I draw attention as well to the potential that there will be a substantial community infrastructure benefit should this be approved, and it is a much needed resource for affordable accommodation in Oxford. Yeah, doing that. And it's policy compliant. So I urge the committee to take that into consideration and support the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson. I'll just see if there are any questions or clarification of you from members of the committee. I just have one actually, and it's maybe for the officer, but I just want to clarify this. So if this were to be approved, is it envisaged that there will be works done on the kitchen to make it compliant with such a large HMO? So we've heard that there's an HMO spatial strategy which indicates that there perhaps potentially isn't enough kitchen space currently. I will ask the officer this as well, but is any works planned to make the kitchens larger, for example, for such a large number of people?
Okay, well, the applicant operates a large number of they prefer the term co-living spaces. The room sizes and the kitchens, they all comply with national standards and Oxfordshire-wide room sizes, including for the kitchen, as far as we're aware. Obviously, if that's not the case, then there won't be an HMO license. But that would be usually part of the HMO licensing rather than the planning.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Simpson. I'll ask our officer to do some questions there as well. Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Simpson? I can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening. And I'm now going to turn to our final speaker on this application, Councillor Scott Horton. Councillor Horton, you know the rules, but 3 minutes, 30 seconds, as and when you're ready.
And thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for hearing us today. Firstly, I must say I'm very frustrated by the way in which this application has been processed by the developer. It's been clear on the ground this was always intended to be a large HMO for some time, yet as noted in the report, the work has instead largely been done through other permissions. Further, as noted in paragraph 732, this means there is no net gain biodiversity required on this development, which if it had been done properly, there would be. Onto the issue of the application as it stands. On point of parking, I note the requirement for 0.5 spaces per bedroom, which is 5.5. Council parking standards made no mention of rounding that I can find. However, conventionally one would round this to 6, not 5. On subject of access, a swept path analysis has been provided. However, as noted by the parish council, and as seen in the images, this is unrealistic as it does not account for the possibility of parked vehicles on the cul-de-sac. A minor side point on parking, there is also a mismatch in the timescales in the proposed condition 6. Report notes in paras 7.6 and 7.7, this development meets housing needs of the local area. I wish to counter this by saying that the Oxfordshire SHMA, which is cited by Core Policy 22, says there is a greater demand for 2 and 3 bed properties, which this used to be, than there is for 1 or 4 plus. I'm actually not sure which one this counts as. And indeed, that while the Dean Court area may be suitable for single professionals, it is also highly suitable for young families having excellent walking access to both primary and secondary schools. Converting family homes into HMOs is not sustainable. Finally, I want to talk about the sheer scale of the proposal. 11 bedrooms in a single house is ridiculous. To show how ridiculous, the pricing table for HMO licenses on the Vale's website maxes out at 10. Further, I cannot satisfy myself that provided bedrooms meet the Development Policy 2, as the nationally described space standards, Appendix H of our local plan, do not go beyond 6 bedrooms. The size of this development is not in keeping with the local area family homes. It clearly goes against both Cumnor DPC 1 and Vale Core Policy 37, as well as the aforementioned DP 2. Excuse me. While paras 711 and 719 of the report note we do not have a policy regarding over-concentration of HMOs, this street in particular and the entire area of Cumnor and neighbouring Botley are seeing rapid expansion of HMOs through both political development rights and planning applications, as this committee well knows from previous meetings. It is clear to me that this over-concentration is not sustainable and the cumulative impact must be considered. I urge the committee to fully consider all the points raised by speakers and commenters and to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Are there any questions for Councillor Wilson? Just because it was a little bit quick, I just want to be really clear. Which core policies, development policies in particular, do you think this doesn't comply with? I think it was core policy 37.
Yes.
The common neighbourhood plan I'm less familiar with. So which elements of the
common neighbourhood plan would be DDC 1, which is it's also essentially about not in keeping with the local area. The development policy, also known as development policy 2, which is around space standards for build rooms, essentially.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for Councillor Wilson? In which to say thank you very much for your time this evening, but of course you've been here anyway. And now I return to any questions we have for Catherine. So has anyone got any questions for our officers? I have a couple, but let's
go ahead.
So I think I've got 3 questions, but they're sort of interrelated. The first one I think is fairly simple, which is that the drop curb, has it already been installed and is it under permitted development? That would be okay under permitted development.
So there's an existing entrance and that's been widened, so that there's an existing drop curb, and then there's a second one proposed that hasn't been implemented, and the drop curb hasn't.
But that drop curb, according to the plans we've got, says PD next to it. Does that mean it could be done under permitted development, or does it mean something else?
That was applied in connection to the dwelling. I'm not entirely sure how that would apply to an HMO, but because it's on the planning application, we're considering it's part of the planning application.
And I would just like you to comment on the HMO spatial strategy that we heard about from Councillor Roberts, about amenity space and kitchen space in particular.
Yes, that wouldn't in itself come into the planning assessments. I have looked at it in terms of the room sizes as a guide, and it does meet them. But yeah, those matters would come as part of the life licensing process. And yeah, I'll be simply looking at it in terms of planning policies.
Understood. Thank you. Right, I'll open up to any other questions. Councillor James.
Thank you. Yeah. So I noticed that one of the reasons given for this being a good location is that it has will have good cycle routes and has good bus routes, and there's cycle parking provision condition. But I can't see what that cycle parking provision is. So the plan it refers to is just like the picture of the outside of a big shed. But I mean, that in itself isn't cycle parking, particularly as the people in the building are not related to one another. So I think reasonably they would expect to be able to lock their bikes against stands, even if they're within a lockable shed.
From the layout, so I think that
Please do.
So that gives a clear idea of where the bin stalls are and where the parking, the cycle parking shed is. I mean that's sort of been considered that it's got capacity for cycle storage. If members felt that wanted some specific details of how that was going to be laid out, that's something that we could request by condition. But purely assessing the size of the area of the shed, that at this stage that's been considered acceptable.
Any further questions?
I have a completely unrelated question.
Ask your unrelated question, please.
So that was about sort of outside amenity space. So clearly, you know, the back garden's been lost, and that was previously the sort of the green and the outdoor amenity space for this bay. But that's now given over to parking and extensions. Councillor Roberts, when speaking, mentioned this as well. The green space at the front doesn't really seem to be very usable as an amenity space. Is that correct? I mean, it just looks like the way they will have a kind of slightly matching frontage, whether really you could kind of turn that into that garden space you could use. Would that be something that could be done?
It is open in character, so people may not want to use that space because you've sort of got that overlooking lack of privacy. But in there's more case of balancing out. So there is a loss of amenity space to the rear, very small area retained, but that's been lost for parking area, and it was a case of weighing up what was available as around site. So that front area is available. It's not great private amenity space, but it's available. Compared with the harm if the rear garden was retained and there was no parking. So it's definitely on balance, but having balanced that, we feel that that's sort of the best they can do on the site, and it's not harmful enough to be conflicting with policy.
Please.
Yeah. I think I'm listening that this cul-de-sac has I've got quite a few HMOs and other holiday Airbnbs and things. So there will be quite a lot of parking, presumably, in this area. And I'm concerned about the residents as well, the existing residents that are living here. Obviously, if you've got 11 new people, there are going to have probably cars visiting, and that is a concern of mine about the car parking. That there is I just have this feeling that it just might be just too much. Although I note that there's no objections, and I'm very keen on looking at that objection. I'd like to hear something more from you. I'm not liking it, but I can't find a reason.
So, Catherine, would you like to come back on the?
Yeah, it's not straightforward. No. I visited the cul-de-sac and I noted the cars, parked in the cul-de-sac and the entrances off that cul-de-sac. But at the same time, there are no parking restrictions, so there's nothing stopping people parking, or there's nothing designating parking for that particular area. Alongside that, we've had a good number of conversations with the highways officer. For HMOs, there's a requirement for 0.5 space per bedroom because of the sustainability of the location, and that's why it's dropped down to 5 rather than being rounded up. So that came through in one of the earlier responses. But alongside that, I think we've got to be careful in not grouping together HMOs, multi-generational properties, Airbnbs, flats. They've all got their place in the planning system, and where it is permitted development, those are outside our control. So it's not possible to sort of put them all into the same category and consider that wider impact. And where there is a wider impact, for example, 6 individuals, over 6 individuals, that comes through the planning process, and that has to be considered on its own merits. So that's how we've reached this point.
Yeah. So my issue is that highways haven't objected. We have no objections from any other
There's no technical objections.
No technical objections. So, should we see if there are any further questions before we move into the debate? Does anyone have any final questions for Catherine? Okay, well, I'm going to suggest that we move into debate. So, to do so, I need a motion on this application. So, would someone like to propose a motion on this application? Councillor Buxton.
Yes, I'm not sure I like it, and I think there are lots of problems with it. But I think the officers have done a really good job here in dealing with all the possible objections to it. But I think, from a planning point of view, that we have to approve this application.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve. Is there a second for that motion? Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Chair. I think there are a lot of issues to consider around HMOs that are not necessarily issues that we can address as a planning committee. So, taking a purely planning view of it, it's difficult for me to see really strong grounds in planning terms for not approving this. And for that reason, I'll second the motion to accept the application.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the officer recommendation to approve this application. I'll open the floor to further debate. Councillor Jameson.
May I pose sort of an amendment to that motion to strengthen the condition on the sites of parking, to actually show plans for parking, because at the moment it is just a big shed, which I don't think constitutes secure parking for 11 people's bikes. Is that something like some officers' advice? That would be a condition that we could reasonably sort of strengthen that.
At the moment, we're asking for a provision of the cycle parking, western cycle stores within 3 months of the date of any permission. That could be changed to those details are submitted to us probably within 2 months, and then implementation within 3 months. So that would give us the opportunity to review layouts and secure cycle storage.
Thank you.
Yeah, so would that be a friendly amendment to the motion? I guess would that be acceptable? Yeah. Further debate on this one. So I'm really struggling with this one, and I agree. I don't think we can refuse this on highways ground. I don't think we can refuse on traffic ground. We don't have a highways objection. But I think the intensification of use is too much. I think that 11-bed HMO is too much. I don't think there is sufficient amenity space. Yeah, and I don't think I can support this. I don't think I can support this application, in spite of there being no technical objections. I think intensification of use, we've heard from councillors, we've heard from residents, and I'll say something that people are saying we shouldn't say. I think HMOs generally are actually a really good thing. I think they're a really good thing that actually adds to the communities, it adds to the mix of housing. I just think 11 bedrooms, it's the intensification of use for me is too high. And so on that basis, I will not support this motion. Though I agree, we can't refuse it based on highways grounds, even though I'm very sympathetic to highways grounds as we mentioned. So I will not be voting for this motion. Further debate, sorry, I should.
As a quick response to that, I suspect having 5 parking spaces for this HMO is probably better provision than some of the smaller HMOs that may well not have any parking space at all.
Yeah, and we've no highways objections, so I would not support the motion refusing this on highways grounds. I would support it only on the intensification of use, but I can't support it.
That's not come out in this in any form, and we have no other objections. You know, I'm very keen on objections with, and so no, I don't like it, and I'm sorry for the people that are living in the cul-de-sac because they seem as though they've got quite a lot to contend with. But on planning grounds alone, and remember, people can go to appeal on planning grounds alone. I have to support the officers on this.
So, any further debate on this application? Right, well, I'm going to suggest we move to a vote on this. So we have a motion to approve the officer recommendation with the added conditional cycling. It'll be fairly clear on what the wording of that would be. Okay, great. So we have a motion to approve. So all those in favour of this application? That's 4 in favour. Those against? Any abstentions? That is approved. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you for our speakers. We'll now move on to our next application, which is Unit B, 78 Cumnor Road. I'll just wait a second for people to leave. Okay. Thank you. And just before we start the next presentation, can I just remind members of the public they should only leave cameras on and unmuted when they are speaking. Very good. So, Mark, you're presenting on this one. Over to you when you're ready.
Yeah, 1 second.
Sorry. Apologies, I didn't mean to rush you.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. This application is referred to Planning Committee this evening at the request of Councillor Shaw for the reasons identified within the report for you. This application seeks Planning Commission to convert the existing buildings on site to provide specialist facilities to provide support for vulnerable parents and their babies. The facility will allow families to remain together in a safe, structured environment whilst receiving assessment, education and support within Oxfordshire. There are a number of residential objections to this from residents nearby. These are outlined within the report before you. I won't go into detail in that. The site is accessed off Cumnor Road by a single lane road, which is to be utilised for the proposed new use. The site will be served by 7 parking spaces, which will be served by staff and on occasion visitors. The proposal involves very limited physical changes to the existing building, and the external appearance remains largely unchanged, with only minor alterations to provide shared amenity space and a buggy store facility. Your officers are satisfied that there would be no significant harm to the character of the area or the receiving landscape. Your officers are also satisfied that the proposed development will not result in harm to a neighbour amenity, ecology, drainage, or environmental health concerns such as noise and light pollution. Concerns regarding highways, pedestrian safety and access have been carefully considered throughout the application process. Following amendments and additional information, Oxfordshire County Council of Highways have withdrawn their objections subject to conditions securing the required crossing and access improvements. While there is some loss of commercial floor space, the report notes that employment opportunities would remain through the operation of the centre, and that the site could potentially be converted to residential use under permitted rights, resulting in a greater loss of employment than was currently proposed. Members were able to visit the site this week and were able to assess the proposal in context with the local area. But for those who are unable to attend, I do have photographs on this presentation I will share. Overall, the social and wellbeing benefits of the specialist care facilities are considered high, and as officers conclude, would outweigh any limited planning harms that have been identified. For these reasons, it is recommended that planning commissions are this evening, subject to conditions outlined within the report. Thank you. These are just some of the photos of the site. I will go through them. So this is the existing access of Cumnor Road. The site is where that sign is, and you go down on the left. This is going down into the site. This is the neighbour's entrance. Same access into the site. That's looking back from where we've just come down. This is the site itself. That's already heavily hard standard, and its relationship with the landscape. Quite an exposed site, but no changes will be proposed. Right. Okay. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Mark. We'll return to some questions that you've heard from our speakers. Our first speaker is Professor Lawrence Proclus, who's a representative of Woodland Town Council. Professor Proclus, please. Oh, sorry. Oh, apologies.
Thank you. May I ask a question of you before I start?
If it's very brief, yes.
But what time of day did you visit the site?
So we visited the site around 2 o'clock, I think. No, it was 12:30, wasn't it? So we were there at 12:30. But please, but you can. We might ask you a question.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Please, you get 3 minutes when you're ready with 30-second warning.
Okay. Well, this is a big planning application in many respects, and I've only got time to make 3 very basic points. The first is that this is an unsafe proposal, in that the traffic going along the B Road, especially between the hours between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning, and 3 and 6:30 in the evening, is considerable, growing, and ignoring the speed limit. And we as a council are very worried that the proposed mitigation that has been put in place in the recent proposal is still not sufficient to deal with the danger having to cross that road. And councillors should take note that it is impossible for people in that centre to access the village unless they cross the road, because there is no pavement on the centre's side. So we are very worried about that, especially during winter. Our second point is to do with the location of this centre. While recognising its importance and need, we do not think that Wootton is the right place for it. There is access to shops, but we have no cafe, we have no facilities in the community centre for mother and baby activities, and above all, there are no medical facilities in Wootton at all, and the nearest medical facilities are in Abingdon and in Botley. The only way that these mothers would have no transport of their own can access these facilities is by bus. We have 1 bus an hour, and that bus frequently doesn't even turn up. And Oxfordshire itself recognises that we have the worst bus service of any village of its kind in the Shire. Thirdly, we are very worried indeed by the structure of this unit as presented in the plans. From talking to people with experience with vulnerable mothers and babies, we think it's quite inadequate for their needs. This is not an ensuite arrangement. It's just bedrooms and a community living and kitchen space. There's not even a provision for a bathroom for each of these mothers and babies. They have to share it. And we're very nervous indeed about the idea of the kitchen and communal living being the same place. So 3 points. And to sum up, our view is that even this is not a planning matter, as I understand it's not, the result will be there'll be no license given for this unit. And the result will be that we as a village will lose a lot of viable small businesses already there, and there'll be no businesses put in their place. And for that reason, the proposal is contrary to our own neighbourhood plan, infrastructure 5.3, business maintenance and growth. All I would say then, if it's not fine, sum up. Yes,
Someone very
one point.
over time, yes.
We would say that please do not go further with this proposal until we have the full summary of the traffic problem from the Glanville survey that's just been done, and then we will know exactly what the traffic is like and what it's going to be like over the next 20-year period.
Thank you very much. We may have some questions of clarification for you, so let me just see if there are any questions. Councillor Rayner.
It's a very simple question. I know you said there were no cafe facilities or facilities in the village. Doesn't the community centre provide quite an extensive range of?
The only thing the community centre supplies is on Thursday lunchtime between 12 and 2. There's no other facilities.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. And that's primarily for the old in the village, not for mothers and young children.
Are there any further questions? I can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening. And now move on to our second speaker on this application, Mark Finn, who's speaking in objection to this application. So Mark Finn, who I think is joining us virtually. Mr. Finn, we can see you.
Hello.
And
Can
we
you
can
hear
hear you. We can. So you have 3 minutes when you're ready with a 30-second warning. Mr. Fenn, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding this application. I'd just like to highlight the impact I believe will have on residents and the surrounding community. Firstly, I think the residents were overwhelmingly in tune with the concerns of the parish council, and we thank the parish council greatly for being completely in touch and considerate and aware of its local surroundings and needs. As identified in section 3.3, objecting to this application, despite the obvious geographic position of this property to a specific use case of a family assessment centre, is concerning. This is seen as a viable prospect given the abundance of better suited opportunities elsewhere in the region. Concerns of site safety, local amenities, poor transport links, as just stated, 24/7 operation in a residential area, and in particular the access road is considered unsafe for the residents without cars and poor transport. The parish council noted the revised approach to the road crossing, but still considers that an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing is insufficient, and a zebra pelican crossing would be required to provide safety for young mothers. Yet we have a partial facilitation by the application to make do with a rubble strip which appears to have serve no purpose other than a tick in a box, and a small landing area for pedestrians surrounded by electrified barbed wire on the perimeter field just millimetres away from speeding cars along the Cumnor Road. The waste management officer stated there is insufficient information. I'm not sure where you are with that. And in terms of the condition of the permitted development fallback of loss of employment, how rewarding and opportunistic this fallback position would be by fostering gain through failure. I ask these questions. Who will manage and police the inevitable parking issues? Who will police and manage the residents walking across our private road, which we formally object to? Who will pick up the litter that will be thrown on the floor by increased foot traffic? Who will police the inevitable increase in local crime? Is there enough police provision? And who will fund this? And who will be responsible for the potential increase in road traffic accidents in our neighbourhood following the introduction of inadequate road safety provision? Furthermore, and this is important, I strongly object to the proposed signage indicated in the diagrams. It is positioned on my boundary, not to the side of my boundary. I'm sure this is an oversight and could be amended, but without doing so would instigate legal action. The signage too close to my entrance, which was number 76, would be unsightly to say the least, and I respectfully request revision to both additions. As a consequence of the proposal amendments, we would need to protect sight lines and overlooking from the road, from the access road, which is raised and in accordance with common planning practices such as raised fences, pergolas and hedges. Camera observations will be positioned to report on trespassing, parking violations, litter dropping, increased road traffic, accidents and crime in accordance with ICO best practices. Please let the record show our objections and concern in this matter. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Finn. I'll just ask for any questions and clarification for you. I think I just have one. It's to do with this matter of signage. Sorry, if I missed it, I apologize. But could you just which signage you're talking about? Because you didn't actually say where you live in relevance to this. You don't have to give us your address if you'd rather not. But just
no, I'm very happy to. So I live on 76 Cumnor Road. When you were showing the entrance to the neighbours, that was my entrance. My whole property is on the line of the access site. If you looked at page 7, I think there was two signage proposals, and one was directly on my property. Yeah, it's that second one on the right hand side. Sorry, that one right there. Yeah, I'm sure it's just an oversight. But that's
I will seek clarification. I will seek clarification from our officer on that matter. But thank you, that's very helpful. Are there any further questions? I can't see any, so thank you very much for your time this evening. And I'm now going to turn to our next speaker, Mr. Neil Perry, who is speaking in support of his application. Perry, thank you for joining us. And everyone else, 3 minutes when you're ready, and you're in a 30-second warning.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I don't propose to actually give speech, and the officer has succinctly covered all of the actual primary points. You hopefully understand the significant need for a facility of this nature. There isn't one in Oxfordshire at the moment. As such, anybody that finds themselves in these vulnerable situations is sent out of area. However, there was a number of questions sort of raised by members on their visit in regard to sort of who the facility will house, etc., which I propose to hopefully address for you. So the facility will house new mothers with newborn babies. This is a court-ordered assessment, so social workers, etc., have found these people to be vulnerable, and as such, this is an appropriate or deemed to be the most appropriate and constructive way of actually addressing those vulnerabilities in order to put them in a safe and secure environment where babies and families can stay together. The duration of each stay for each resident is between 12 and 14 weeks, and they're constantly assessed by a social worker who's present all the time with carers, etc. The occupancy is expected to be between 70 and 85% and is a staggered use, so somewhere between 10 and 13 bedrooms should be in use at any time. At full capacity, as I say, there's 3 to 4 members of staff on site during the day, with a member of staff being present throughout the night. That is made up of a facilities manager, 2 carers and a social worker. A social worker will bring all residents to the facility. They will not be permitted any transport at all. So you will walk to the facility. If you need to leave the facility, the social worker will accompany you to any appointments that you need to go, unless that needs to be done on foot, etc. Any visitors will have to be pre-arranged and pre-agreed with the social worker. Visiting hours will be limited between 10 and 4 p.m. and only be, as I said, permitted. It is anticipated that will be absolutely minimal vehicle movements because of the fact that you've actually got a limited number of staff. So at present, you've got 20 members of who are employed on site in various businesses. So there's going to be a significant reduction in vehicular movements every day in terms of the actual transport to it. Your officers have spent a long time with ourselves and the applicant looking at the technical matters. You have no technical objections. In regard to the signage, I think that is possibly an oversight in terms of the comment from the neighbour. If that sign needs to be moved to the opposite side of the road, that's fine. That is just a matter that your officer, in terms of highways officer, asked for clear signage to make sure that pedestrians were noted. As I say, there is no technical objections. I'd recommend your officer's recommendation to you. I welcome any further comments or questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or clarification?
So you clarified what sort of people will be staying in this accommodation. Did you clarify how long typically would a mother and baby be there for?
So it's 12 to 14 weeks is a typical stay in terms of the court order. You assess constantly through that process. If you have felt that you're not going to pass the assessment, then you can actually be assessed to stay again. And so repeat the actual programme in terms of the assessment and education, so you can stay for a further period. If you don't fulfil the requirements, then the court order can kick into force and you can actually leave the facility and your child will be taken into care. So the whole aim is not for that to happen and for children to be placed into care, but to actually provide a safe environment where education and support can be given. So the programme can be repeated on a number of occasions, basically.
Mr. Perry, I've got a question. So I assume that you've operated with these facilities in other parts of the country, or is it?
I'm not. I'm just the architect.
Okay,
Okay. So this facility is a new facility.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, and if you can't shed light on this, then don't be happy. But is that if, for example, neighbours say this was to be approved, neighbours did have concerns about parking on the private drive, about litter or anything like that, is there a mechanism through which they can contact?
Yeah, there's a facilities manager. So facilities managers on site every single day.
Okay.
And so if there are concerns about either behaviour, etc., then they have the ability to actually go and speak to somebody continuously about that process. It's a controlled environment, but it's not a secure environment. So visitors, etc., have to actually be booked in and have to be supervised. So there is a social worker that is employed and constantly on site alongside the carers. So this is not an environment where people just come and randomly just stay. They are constantly assessed and they are constantly supervised. That's the whole point.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, Mr. Perry?
Yes, if I may. The facilities were questioned. So young mothers and babies would need as much facilities for washing, etc. So is there no, do you think that you have enough facilities?
Yeah, so basically this facility has been designed alongside experienced midwives. So there's 3 experienced midwives that have been consulted throughout the actual process. It's also been consulted with the head of Startwell at Oxfordshire Health, basically. So they have actually made the recommendations in terms of what facilities that they actually believe to be appropriate. So comments in regard to en suites, etc. That is not what was actually been requested. They've actually requested there's actually shared facilities because they feel that gives greater supervision of those facilities and less chance of potential issues. So when they're teaching young mothers, potentially, I say young mothers, that shouldn't be gender specific, but I have to be. To bathe a child, for example, that needs to be done in an environment which can actually be overseen, basically. So the facilities are informed by experts, and they've requested that the layout and facilities as they actually are. So,
and if I may ask another one, so how will you handle security?
In the sense of security,
would there be issues with? Presumably, there might be issues with these young mums.
In terms of, so there's a social worker constantly on site with them, and they're constantly in a state of assessment. So if there was a security issue in terms of antisocial behaviour, etc., that would immediately warrant social services to be involved, basically, in order to actually enact that.
I'm thinking about people that might want to visit them.
So again, it's a facility where you have to book in to actually be brought into it. You're taken via a social worker to the facility. So you're trying, the whole purpose of the facility is to remove you from the environment you purposely were in.
So they're vulnerable.
They are vulnerable.
Thank you. That's the word I'm trying to make a picture of the young mums, because you say about a court order as well. So I would be concerned about where it is, because there's a paddock of lovely views. It is really a lovely spot. But the safety and the vulnerability.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about safety and vulnerability, so these are people that may have been in care, they may have certain mental health issues, they may actually have been in a sort of a broken home situation. So it's not so much a situation where there's a security issue of violence or drug abuse and things like that. This facility will not cater for people who've had abuse issues. This is people who are vulnerable and are not in a supported environment, and so therefore that's why social services is. So as I say, it's not a secure facility. So if it was a matter that there was a security risk, then that would have to be a different type of facility.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Wren.
We went on a site visit, well worth doing. And we discussed with Mark the crossing at the top.
Yeah.
And all those three. You did mention that no one will be allowed to leave the facility for any reason.
In a car. So if they wish to leave to actually visit the shops, then they're allowed to leave, but they need to actually check in and out with the actual facilities manager and social worker.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. So there would still be walking and crossing and going down to the shops, etc.
Potentially, when they've been assessed to be suitably in a place in terms of their care process, that means that they can actually go. So, I mean, one of the reasons why the actual experts believe this facility is in a good location is that there is sort of some shops within close proximity. There's a chemist, there's other shops, etc. You've got a public house, you've got a community centre, you've got a child.
Public house. Sorry, I'm afraid we below.
I apologise, but that was it's incorrect.
I'll carry on, Sean, please do. You have a number of facilities which are actually in close proximity, and you've also got a playground, etc. So they believe that there is a number of facilities which are beneficial, but when somebody's reached a appropriate point within their assessment, then yes, they will be allowed to leave the city. They're not stopped from going out.
No, I didn't suggest that.
Yeah,
my concern is you've got vulnerable people who
potentially
maybe not.
It's vulnerable in the sense of having a small person to care for and actually not being in an environment where you've actually got that support.
But they will be assessed for that ability.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any final questions? In which to say thank you very much for your time this evening. And now I'm going to suggest we turn back to questions for our officer. I've got a very quick one and a slightly more substantive one. The first one is to do with signage. Is that just something on the drawing that could easily be on the other side?
Yes, they would have to arrange for that.
Sure, but is it something that we need to condition now to make sure it's on the other side?
No,
or is it something that we can just
highway related sort of signage on this road need that in its own mind. So they want to put more signage.
Well, it's not more signage, it's more just changing the location of that sign.
Right, okay, well, I mean, it's indicative of them, so we can't, that's not what we're not bringing the signage up on the plan.
Okay, so it's okay. Understood. And then the other question is to do with loss of employment. And I just wondered, so as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't a personal permission. So this isn't one where we're saying change of use just for this particular applicant. So this, in theory, as we've heard, if it didn't get the licensing, it could then be a change of use. And so what sort of other things could take place under that change of use categorization if this doesn't get the licensing?
The condition I've placed is to ensure that the use is as requested as part of this application.
Right.
So that condition would stick in terms of.
Could you talk me through the condition? Sorry, just to be very clear.
1 second.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I've got this straight in my head. So apologies if I'm. Condition 4.
Okay.
Only for the purposes of this application, as I know some use, so it would have to be used as, doesn't have to be a personal issue, but it has to be used for the intended purpose. Okay, understood. Thank you. And if it couldn't be used for that, it would revert. The existing use would still be permissible.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of instances where planning can be granted, but there might also be some legal matters that dealt with outside, which may not result in those permissions being viable to be implemented.
Thank you.
So yeah, that might.
Councillor Hannaby.
Yeah, on the crossing, it's not going to be it's just going to be zebras. It's just ordinary crossing with no.
It's just a top curve. Yes, there's no detail on that.
And I mean, we know it's a very busy road. We all know that road. So, is it feasible that we could have?
At this point, no.
No. And why was that then?
It's not what we've arranged. Our talking with highways.
Oh, so highways.
Highways have been.
I've agreed.
Yes, they've been involved in this, and they are satisfied with crossing as proposed.
Okay.
We've worked with them over a number of months to arrange this. So
that's right. That's really.
Any further questions? Councillor James.
Yes. Can you explain a little bit more about the licensing for this type of use and how, if at all, that interacts with planning commission or what we're looking at?
Unfortunately, I can't comment to the licensing as it's out of my remit. The agent seems to suggest that I'm afraid you've spoken, you won't be able to come back on that. But in terms of its relevance to this stage, it's not relevant.
No. Okay.
Any further questions for our officers before we move into debate? Yes, please.
One more, yeah.
Sure,
so I noticed that there were no sort of objections or concerns raised about drainage because it doesn't really change the hard standing or the amount of where water will be displaced from its current use. But I also noted that there were concerns raised by various respondents that actually there already is a flooding problem in that area. Is there any opportunity to actually improve and relieve flooding through this application?
Not as part of this application. If our drainage team required such, then we could have asked them to do so. But there was no justified reason to provide that based on our drainage engineers' knowledge and experience on association sites in the area.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mark? In which case, I'm suggesting we move into debate, and to do so, I need a motion. So, would someone like to put forward a motion on this application?
I'd like to put the motion that we accept the recommendations of the officers as set out.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Rain.
Second that motion.
I open the floor to debate.
Well, I thought it was very useful to go on site. It was a good, nice day, and it was sort of midday and etc. I thought the facilities were well looked after. It is tucked up at the top of a long road, and you've got very nice views, etc. We've heard a little bit more of the mums, etc., who will be actually in there, presumably, and that was really what I was concerned about, that there would be security. I'm quite pleased that we have said that there would be security of young mums with their babies.
Anything further on this application? If no one has anything further to say, I suggest take a vote on this application. So all those in favour of our motion to approve? Those against? Any abstentions? I think that's unanimous. So thank you very much to all our speakers on that. And now it turns to the final application we're considering this evening, Chapel, Newbury Street, and actually, let's just pause for 2 minutes to get some rules.
No, sorry. No, sorry.
Thank you very much. So we've got our final application this evening, the Chapel, Newbury Street. Please, you could talk us through this.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I need to point out that some of the plans attached to your report are actually not the most recent version. So you've got floor plan drawing 201. The current version is revision C. You've also got a drawing 202. The current version of that is revision C. And there's an east elevation where the correct revision is E, and then the north elevation is the correct revision number is, so the drawing number is 204 and the revision is C. So I apologise for that. So these applications are referred to planning committee at the request of the local member. The application site is the chapel, a grade 2 listed, former chapel in the town of Wantage. And planning permission and listed building consent is sought for the extension and alteration to the building and its use as a dwelling house. The chapel formerly served an independent girls' school, but following the closure of the school, the retained adjacent school buildings were converted to dwellings and new dwellings were erected in the school's grounds. The chapel was converted to a dentist surgery, and this is how the building was used most recently. The site is within Wantage Town Centre conservation area, and several surrounding listed buildings are listed. This is the site and location plan and block plans showing the existing and proposed. So this is the existing south and east elevations of the chapel. This is the north and west elevations, and it's the west elevation which fronts onto Newbury Street. These are the north elevations, existing and proposed, and you can see the obviously extension to the rear, to the side, sorry, and the proposed fence. This section is lower. And these are the existing proposed east elevations, and you can see the first floor side extension. This is the existing proposed south elevation, and it includes the new fence, which is higher in this part, and also the solar panels on the roof of the chapel. So this is the existing floor plans, albeit it shows the layout as it was when it was a dentist surgery, and those internal divisions have been removed since they vacated property. So this is the proposed floor plans. So you can see the new side extension, and this contains the bulk of the day-to-day living facilities, i.e. kitchen, bedrooms, etc. Whereas the chapel itself, you can see on the first floor that the balcony is being extended into the chapel, with a staircase and bedroom on the first floor, and then a mezzanine on the second. So this is the north elevation showing the fencing, which was amended to reduce its height in this part. And then this drawing shows the full extent of the fencing. And as you can see, it steps down from 1.8 meters on the left-hand side, down to 1.5. So these are some photos of the site. So as you can see, the site is currently open. So this is essentially to the rear of the chapel, but this is a parking area that serves all the dwellings that surround it. So these are its northern neighbours, and this is also a listed building. And this is again the northern neighbour that connects with the chapel. And again, these northern neighbours that currently have the open land in front of them. So this again is the more parking and turning area with the large tree. And this is the car parking that was designated for the dentist surgery that is owned by the applicant. And this is what will become the garden area of the dwelling. And you can just about see in the background that there is some low metal fencing of a similar design to that proposed, albeit what's proposed is higher than that. And this is the join again between the chapel and its southern neighbour. So as outlined in the report, the council's heritage officer considers that the alterations and extensions to the building will cause less than substantial harm to the significance of the building and to the character and appearance of the conservation area. The NPPF requires great weight to be given to any harm to designated heritage assets, and less than substantial harm should only be approved if harm is outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme, which can include securing its optimum viable use. In officer's opinion, the proposed development is the minimum level of harm which could be caused to facilitate residential use of the building, and that this represents the optimum viable use of the building, as all other uses would either be unviable, unrealistic, or cause equal or greater harm to the assets. Therefore, the public benefits in terms of securing a long-term viable use which ensures the building's preservation is considered to outweigh the harm in officer's opinion. The lack of viable alternative uses is also considered to justify the loss of employment, and for the reasons outlined in the report, it is also considered that proposals would not be significantly harmful to the amenity of neighbouring occupiers, nor harmful to highway safety, trees, ecology, and flood risk. Therefore, subject to the recommended conditions, officers recommend that planning permission and listed building consent should be granted. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Now we'll return to some questions of the first speakers on this application. Our first speaker is Councillor Andy Crawford, who's a representative of Wanted Town Council. Andy, Councillor Crawford, you have 3 minutes.
I'm told I had 6 minutes because I'm speaking as local members.
You do. Would you like to have your full 6 minutes now, or would you like to 3 minutes and then 3 minutes later? Full 6 minutes now. In that case, you'll get do you want a 1 minute warning or a 30-second warning?
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Right, probably won't take 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. So thank you for letting me speak tonight. The chapel is a landmark building in Wantage with very significant architectural and historic merit for our town. I have concerns relating to a number of issues relating to the application, but we'll focus in on just 2 major points, and bearing in mind that the underlying test in this case is one of preserving or enhancing this listed building, and I would argue that the plans before you tonight did not pass this test. Firstly, and this is perhaps the least important of my points, relates to the proposed metal fence which will surround the whole of the unbuilt area of the building. elevation drawing 2410.2009A, which is online. I'm not sure it's in your pack tonight, illustrates a 1.2 metre high metal fence, not 1.5 as the officer just said. This does not reflect this does reflect some other features within the site, the Holmes St Mary's site, although its scale is significantly more impactful. More germane, however, is site plan drawing 2410.207B, which clearly shows that the fence will not in fact be 1.2 metres high, but 1.8 for the majority of its length. And I would suggest to you that the east elevation plan that we saw earlier on the one line, doesn't actually properly describe that. The elevation plans are not to scale, and I think they paint a wholly misleading picture of what will actually be built if the application is permitted. I fail to see how this either enhances or preserves the listed building. Frankly, it looks more like a prison exercise yard. Secondly, and the main concern of myself and the Town Council relates to the proposed changes to the extension, and in particular the argument that they are necessary to ensure that the building is viable. The outgoing tenant is a major dentistry firm, who are on record as stating that this is, and it's quoted in your papers tonight, for us it's just another commercial property. We can't take time to deal with the details. However, there is a schedule of dilapidations in your papers that show the tenant is liable for £346,000 of repairs in order to bring the building back into an acceptable state. These repairs will clearly preserve the building for the foreseeable future. You might be asking yourself, if the building is in such a state of disrepair, why have we as a planning authority not taken enforcement action? This is answered in the Heritage Viability Statement, which is in your papers, where it is recorded that our Heritage Officer told the client it is not possible to take enforcement action despite concern because of lack of enforcement resources. Taken together, these 2 points make it clear that the preservation of the building is not in fact dependent upon the scheme but before you tonight. That said, and perhaps regrettably, I acknowledge that the change of use from commercial to residential is in line with the NPPF, even though the 12-month marketing rule required by our own planning policy has not been complied with. The question is more what changes are necessary to create a viable dwelling and yet still comply with the competing test of preserving and enhancing. So not only is the significant extension not necessary to ensure the whole building is preserved, it gives rise to additional issues as noted by our own Heritage Officer. Again, to quote her, proposed extension would harm the setting of the listed building, affecting the significance of the appearance of the building as a landmark and independent building within the development. The subsequent justification relates not at all to the extension, but to the internal features and related to repairs to existing deterioration of the building. And indeed, in an earlier application, which didn't even have an extension, the Heritage Officer concluded that it presented significant, less than substantial harm to substantial harm. So somehow the addition of the size of an extension has somehow reduced the harm, which I failed to understand. There is nothing in this report or supporting papers that explains why this major extension is at all necessary to preserve the listed building, and it certainly won't enhance it. The extension will protrude at the front of the building, changing the visual aesthetic significantly. The additional story will totally obscure part of the full drop windows on the northern elevation, which are a major feature of the listed chapel. And the report admits that the proximity is 50% closer than permitted by our own design guide, 8 metres versus 12 metres. And there'll be significant overlooking and overshadowing caused by the unnecessary first floor extension. The client's own conservation architect, in support of a previously withdrawn application in May of last year, produced plans that show significant internal modifications to the internal chapel space, creation of bedroom and living space, and sensitive retention of important features, but importantly, no external changes. And the client's own conservation architect described these plans, and again I quote, deemed to have the most advantages and least disadvantages, and leaving the exterior of the building untouched. I wholly agree with these sentiments and would ask the committee to agree. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crawford. I'll see if anyone has any questions or clarification. Councillor Wilson.
You mentioned the 12-month advertising period for the changing use from being an employment opportunity. Can you just go into a bit more detail on that. It's not part of the local plan. I'm super familiar with it.
My understanding, the officer can correct me if I'm wrong, is that when we convert a commercial property to residential, we're required, and loss of employment, we're required to have evidence that it's been marketed 12 months prior to the planning application coming forward.
And we don't have any of that. That you're aware
so he's nodding his head and then he's shaking his head.
we will clarify with the officer when we get.
And that is a relatively minor point, frankly. I'm still people from the rest.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I wish to say thank you very much for your time this evening. And now we'll turn to our next speaker, which is Sean Flanagan, who's joining us virtually. Mr. Flanagan, are you there?
Hello.
Hello, good evening. Well, we can see you and we can hear you. And as everyone else, you have 3 minutes and we'll give you a 30-second warning. So thank you for joining us whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. My name is Sean Flanagan and I live at number 13 St Mary's. I look onto the open green. I am also speaking on behalf of number 14, 2 homes directly and permanently affected by this proposal. We fully support the principle of returning the chapel to residential use. Our concern is simply that the application does not yet provide enough information to understand its impact on neighbouring residents. The proposed hedge or boundary treatment remains undefined. We still have no confirmed details of its exact position, its distance from our homes, the species, the height and density it will reach, or how it will be maintained. Without this, neither residents nor councillors can reliably judge the level of enclosure being proposed. You are effectively being asked to approve a boundary without knowing what the boundary will be. This matters because number 13 and 14 sit immediately adjacent to the site. 14 shares a party wall with the chapel and sits at a lower ground level, making it especially sensitive to any loss of light, outlook or openness. For number 13, the proposed boundary would reduce the width of our only access to under 1 metre. We have no access from the other side of the road. That raises clear concerns about safe daily access and the ability of emergency services to reach the property, issues the application does not address. The existing openness of the chapel grounds is an important part of the listed building's setting. The proposal risks replacing that openness with enclosure, yet no evidence has been provided to show that such a significant change is necessary or that less intrusive alternatives have been explored. There are also wider community considerations. Residents collectively fund the shared access road, which is relied upon by neighbours, visitors, deliveries, service providers, emergency vehicles. Despite this, the application offers very limited information on how the new residential use will affect access, parking demand, manoeuvrability or emergency access. On such a constrained site, these are not minor details, they go to the practical functioning of the development. Overall, the application relies on assumptions rather than evidence. The burden should rest with the applicant to demonstrate that the proposal is necessary, proportionate, and the least harmful option. In our view, that burden has not been met. We therefore ask the committee to give substantial weight to the unresolved impacts on residential amenity, heritage setting, access, and community infrastructure. If the committee is minded to approve the application, we respectfully request robust conditions requiring full details of the hedge's location, species, height, maintenance and long-term management, together with clear evidence that neighbouring amenity access, parking and emergency access will not be adversely affected. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Flanagan. I'll see if there are any questions and clarification for you. I think I just have one, which is just from my own mind from your statement. The primary concern that you're referencing is to do with the boundary treatment in particular and the closed off nature of the space. Is that more or less correct?
That is, what it doesn't say, the pictures were quite good because people moved for different reasons. The pathway, the green is straddled by about 4 to 5 cars at night. And also the 4 parking spaces that were allocated to the chapel have always been used at night. So there's a considerable issue with parking facility. There's the fact that so many people come round that corner. It's access for emergency services. And to be quite honest, when I moved in, we moved in by parking on the green, which anybody would, as the person who moved out, use the green as well, because there's limited access down the pathway. So we're not saying something can't be met, but we need to see exactly what we're agreeing to or disagreeing to.
Understood. Thank you very much. I'll see if there are any other further questions for you.
Thank you.
I can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening, Mr. Flanagan, and I'll turn to our next speaker on this application. We have 2 people registered to speak in support, Elaine Kimber and Christian Randall. Are you both there?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Perfect. Mr. Randall, I can't see you at the moment. Oh, no, I can see both of you. So hopefully it's been explained to you that you have 3 minutes of shared time. So you'll get normal 30-second warning, but then committee may ask questions to either of you afterwards. So I don't know whether one of you is speaking or whether both of you are speaking.
We're both speaking. I'm just going to go first and then hand over to Christian to talk about the heritage side of things, if that would be okay.
That's absolutely fine. Well, you're both very welcome, and you have 3 minutes in total. So please start when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm Elaine Kimber, Bluestone Planning, and I'm for the applicant. Christian Randall, the scheme's conservation architect, will follow me. We ask for you to support your officer's recommendation to approve both applications. The Grade 2 listed former chapel has deteriorated under commercial use. On the loss of employment, the last occupier was a national dental group with over 140 practices. They held the building for 15 years, left voluntarily, and handed it back, with a claim now standing at $346,000. Residential use secures the building's repair and long-term future. Christian will now address the heritage case.
Good evening. My name is Christian Randall, and I'm an RIBA and AABC accredited conservation architect. And my practice, Conservation Architects, is located a few hundred metres from St Mary's Chapel. This is a property which I've had a particular interest in for many years, having first surveyed it in 2008, shortly after it ceased being used by the school. My first priority in designing the scheme was to retain as much of the building's significance as possible, whilst enabling it to be used long-term in a way which would be best safeguard and protect it. The design seeks to retain the sense of internal chapel space of the chapel building, which is largely achieved by putting much of the accommodation within the more modern north side extension. Through its use as a commercial property, the significance of this chapel has been eroded. However, the proposal reinstates features lost in that conversion. Your heritage officer agrees the harm is less than substantial, is the minimum necessary, and that residential use is the building's optimum viable use. Currently, the grounds around the building are open. Vegetation has grown directly against the listed walls, or it had done. It clogged gutters and caused water ingress. And at the time, I was unable to do a full condition survey because of this plant growth and the rubbish and unauthorised structures. A defined boundary lets the property be properly maintained and protected. The boundary will have open metal railings, and your heritage officer raises no objection. Securing this building's future outweighs the less than substantial harm, and I would urge you to grant permission and consent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both so much. I will now ask if members of the committee have any questions for you. Councillor Madison.
Thank you. I was hoping you could speak a little bit more about the conservation. It's just, to my mind, extending a building like this does risk harm. How can we be confident that the historical value of the building will be preserved, even though these works are being carried out? That was a question for either of you.
Elaine, would you like me to answer that?
Yeah, I think so, Christian. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I've tried to do a design which preserves as much of the significance as possible. The frontage on the street, onto Newbury Street, is completely unaltered and always will be. And so pretty much so is the east elevation, apart from the extension, obviously, as mentioned. And the south side will again stay pretty much as it is at the moment. So in order to make it viable as a domestic dwelling, like I say, we've had to use the extension to put a lot of the day-to-day amenities in. So again, part of the building's significance is the interior. And so we put a lot of effort into retaining the chapel space and hence a raked-backed gallery. So there is some change. So, it isn't really possible to do everything within the chapel area. Otherwise, you would have to divide that whole space up, which wouldn't really work. And you would be harming the building by doing that. So we've gone for the least harmful way of doing things, which is to alter the extension, which is a later structure. And therefore, that's kind of how we've approached it, because commercial use is not right for this building. It's caused harm. And, it was, I've been involved in this building a long time, and it was offered to several groups back in about 2008, 9 or 10, I think. And none of them were interested because of the upkeep and so on. The current owner is someone who's willing to put in money, more money than it's actually worth, to look after it and preserve it. You won't find many people like that. I'm sorry, I've probably strayed outside what you asked me there.
It's interesting, thanks.
But I think I have a follow-up question, which I think you sort of answered. I just want to be clear on. So we heard earlier that initially there have been applications which maybe you were involved in that didn't have this extension, or had maybe a small version, which were judged by Heritage to do more harm than this one with the extension. Now, is that because the previous versions were doing more alterations to the main bulk of the chapel? If you could just clarify that for me, like why might that be? What were some previous iterations of this that maybe didn't include the extension look like? And what was
I don't think there has been a previous iteration. The current, the proposal is pretty well exactly what's always been proposed. Elaine, apologies, am I forgetting something? I don't think there has been a previous iteration.
No.
I'm not sure where that came from.
Pre-application.
Oh, okay.
It was a pre-application, but again, that did involve the extension. So I'm.
I think the pre-application was very slightly larger actually than what we're proposing now. So nothing's really changed. It's pretty well exactly as it always has been.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions?
Well, I just want to understand what the neighbours, did you manage to hear the neighbour that just came on, or did you not? He was concerned about the services, the fire rescue, ambulance, those sort of things, being able to get round, and that you reduced the area where these services could access. Well, could you explain why you've done that?
That's not the case. That isn't the case. We're not restricting any access whatsoever, and we're not impacting any access routes or any parking or anything like that. So I'm not. I think it may be a misunderstanding. I am familiar with all of these objections because they've been around quite a while. I think a lot of it may be not really understanding the proposal, because that's never been the case, and obviously we would never do that either.
We need clarifications from the office when you're speaking.
Any further questions for these speakers? I can't see any, so say thank you very much for your time here this evening. And now we're going to return to questions for our officer. So, do we have any questions for our officer? Councillor Wilson.
Well, that's the same question I asked Councillor Crawford about the advertising, change of use, the advertising it as a commercial property before the use has changed.
Yeah, so it falls under policy CP 29. I think my head. And essentially, the policy says that it's not in the wording of the policy; it's in the supporting text. It says that it's expected that for you to propose the loss of employment, you should provide 12 months of continuous marketing to demonstrate that there's no interest in continuing employment use. But as outlined in the report, that policy was adopted under a very different policy context, in the sense that back then planning permission was generally needed for any change of use from employment, and each individual type of employment. Also, as in the past, as this used to be a dentist, which was the D1 use, you would have required planning permission to change it to an office. Whereas now they've all been lumped into the same use class, which is E. So what we would traditionally view as employment has been watered down massively, because, as I say in my report, this could be turned into a gym with no members of staff, or occasionally a member of staff on site. And also, permitted development now allows employment uses to be lost without any consideration of the loss of employment. But that doesn't apply here because it's a listed building. But if it were not listed, we would have very little control over the loss of employment or the reduction in employment, which we would have had when that policy was adopted. And hence, I think it's massively hamstrung and sort of gutted that policy, unfortunately. And for that reason, I don't think it's reasonable to object to the loss of employment, particularly when they have gone through all the alternative kind of employment uses and come up with what I see as valid reasons to why they're not viable. And I think personally, I imagine that probably the most likely use would potentially be like an open plan office, obviously, because that would lend itself to the chapel. But then I don't know, if you were looking for office space, I don't know why you would go for a listed building with poor insulation, etc. So I think, yeah, it's that's the reason it's not viable, unfortunately. Thank you.
Well, yes, so there seems to be some sort of confusion by the gentleman that spoke there, the resident. So did you take a note of that? Did you understand what he was trying to say?
So, yeah, I must admit I was also a little bit confused as to what the specific point being raised. So it is true that what open land is being enclosed with a metal fence. But obviously that is all within the applicant's ownership, and that land was always owned by whoever owned the chapel. I think that what has happened, obviously, in the almost 20 years that this development's been here, but because it's always been open and the owner of the chapel has never sought to prevent people using the land, it potentially feels more like communal open space for the resident. But unfortunately, that's never actually been legally the position. It's always been private property. And I think potentially it's referring, so there's paths to the properties that will be alongside this new fence. But that was always the extent of their property. So if this wasn't, so this is slightly complicated by the fact that because it's a listed building, you need planning permission to put up a fence. But if it were not, at any time the applicant could have fenced this land off, and they could technically prosecute people for trespassing on their land. So I think it's potentially that change in how the space is used is obviously I would understand if I've lived there for 20 odd years and used this land to suddenly lose it. But in terms of access, etc., I don't think there's any actual change to the access. In terms of legally, the path of their right of access is not being changed by this.
And then he was talking about the planting, etc.
Yeah, so I'm not conditioning any planting because I don't consider, and the Heritage Officer didn't request it, that fencing is harmful in the sense that it then requires planting to soften it. So I haven't required any planting. Obviously planting plants is not development. So as with the fence, the applicant could, if they wished, plant leylandii hedges all around their boundary and have ginormous trees without planning permission. So I think it's hard for us to say that a potential hedge which may be planted would be unacceptable because we have no control to prevent that.
And let's clarify on that. If an applicant were to do that, I genuinely don't know why I don't know the answer to this. Would they require listed building consent? This is no. So the listed building consent is required because it's a fence. So the boundary treatment referred to in condition 10 is the fence.
Yes.
So the boundary isn't planting and things like that we normally would.
Yeah, it's the fence, and the reason I've conditioned it is because if it was not specific to those drawings, there is the potential that it could be a close bordered fence or something which would be significantly harmful. So the idea of that condition is to keep it as visible, the visibility through it as much as possible.
So as open as possible.
Yes.
Well, okay, understood. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Please, Councillor James.
Yeah, I've got a few. So I did wonder about the amenity of it as a dwelling, actually, in particular around the energy efficiency. So I looked up its EPC. It only has commercial EPC at the moment, but although they're different domestic ones, they go A to G and it's G. It's at the absolute bottom. It's absolutely appalling energy efficiency. Is it really realistic that can be a livable space?
Yeah, so there is obviously the parish officer has requested details of insulation because there will clearly need to be improvements to the fabric of the building. But we are requesting details such that can be done in as sensitive way as possible. So yeah, there will undoubtedly need to be improvements to the thermal and energy efficiency. They're proposing an air source heat pump and the solar panels, obviously as a means of renewable and low carbon. But yes, there will be insulation, and we require details of that. But there will obviously be a building control application which will sit alongside this, so it will have to comply with that the regulations to create a home which is livable.
So I think on the sustainability plan in the documents, it said that the extension has to comply with Part L, which I think is building regulations, but the chapel doesn't.
Potentially, so as in, so I must admit it's obviously building regs, it's not planning. So I'm sure there are carve outs for listed buildings, but as I said, we are requesting details of insulation. So there certainly is insulation within the chapel as well. But then that will essentially be treated as a new build, so that will be modern insulation, and that is where the applicants will spend most of their time would be in this, and that's kind of the point, is that the primary living accommodation has been put in this building so that as much as possible the chapel can be left open as it is currently.
I have some other questions but not related. So I was concerned that there was no requirement for cycle parking, and I noticed that was because of heritage, but apparently it's fine to have a bin shed. I mean, why is it fine to have a bin shed but not a cycle shed?
So I think essentially that request came in, and if we can reduce outbuildings, then I think we should. And I think there is, in this instance, there is enough internal space. There's a sort of cupboard at the front of the building which could be suitable. So to try and reduce the proliferation of outbuildings, I haven't recommended details of cycle storage. But yes, in terms of reducing clutter from bins, I think a bin store is justified. But a bin store, cycle store, and then you're potentially proliferating buildings, which we would seek to avoid.
Yeah, I'm not entirely happy with that, because I don't see how you can store a bike at the front of the building because it's got steps.
We can maybe discuss this in. Have you got any further questions?
Yes, I do.
Please, sorry, I'm not.
I wanted to ask about the point that Councillor Crawford made about the dilapidations and whether that is in fact another way of securing, at least for the foreseeable future, the protection of this listed building.
As far as I understand it, that is a in terms of that's a civil matter between the owner is requesting that money because they, as far as I understand it, they don't believe that the tenants were according with the terms of their tenancy, which required maintenance of the building. That's obviously completely separate from planning. We have no ability to enforce that. And in our opinion, even if those repairs were to be made and a commercial operator did occupy the building, in our opinion, it will then again the dilapidation will occur again because commercial operators just have much less incentive to maintain the building in the same way that a homeowner would, because obviously it's their home and their property, and that's another reason why we consider residential to be preferable to commercial, is that you secure a long-term use with a vested interest in preserving the building, rather than a commercial operator who potentially, for them, that's a minor concern compared to obviously their profit margins, etc. on the business.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions?
Okay. Can I have another go at the fencing? Because we listened to Councillor Crawford as well. Is that the most suitable fencing for the listed? It's a very important building as well. Yeah, I mean, I've known the building as long as I've been on this earth, so and have been in when it has been used as the chapel. So I'm quite concerned that we get this as right as we can, for obviously also for the neighbours who are really on top of each other.
Yeah, so I think obviously I didn't design the scheme, but I would imagine the intention was that obviously a metal railing is more sympathetic, and metal railings are like a Victorian feature. I think post and rail would be a bit at odds because it's a town centre location. It's not a rural setting, and obviously close border fencing would look awful. I think it's reasonable that the applicant wishes to have some form of enclosure, and I personally think it is the least harmful option in this location, and the conservation officer hasn't raised so she initially raised concerns about its height across the whole, but once it was reduced, she was happy that then was suitable.
So this brings me back to what plants and what trees and things, because I think there is a huge concern by the residents that they might have something that's really ungainly and not manageable.
Yeah, they may well do. I just think our ability to control that is very limited, because it's their property. They're free to plant, well, within reason, whatever they like.
Well, I think that exhausted.
I suggest we potentially move into debate. So we're going to have to do two motions on this one, but let's take a motion on the full, the first one, which is the full application, and then we'll do listed building afterwards. So can I have a motion put forward on E25 B27954? Councillor James.
I would like to propose that we actually reject the proposal. I don't personally feel, from what I've heard, that the heritage harm has been outweighed by the sort of the benefit of securing it as a living space. I'm slightly unconvinced by it as a living space, really. That in fact it seems like a sort of new house that people live in, and actually the chapel's quite hard to use at all, really. In any I imagine it'd be quite cold and bleak. So that's what I would like to.
Do I have a second of that motion? That's the motion.
Thanks, Chair. I was quite split on this one, actually. I was very concerned about the heritage harm coming into the meeting. I think the speaker we had earlier, I think was the architect. I think did make some good points. I think there has been some effort on his part, I think, to make a sympathetic extension to enable it to be used as a residence, but I'm not completely swayed by it, and I'm not convinced that an extension to the listed building in the conservation area really is the best thing that we can do to preserve and enhance a historic asset. And for that reason, I'll be seconding the motion put forward by Councillor James.
I open the floor to that. Anyone? Councillor Orson.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. Actually, I quite like the extension. I think it's providing the materials are in keeping with those being conditioned. Then I think it's a fairly sympathetic way of doing it. The bit I'm less certain about, although comments made about the sort of style of fencing we're talking about, and was the fencing, being 6 foot tall is pretty high, but if it is that sort of wrought iron style Victorian style fence, then I can see that could be quite in keeping with what's around there. I have to weigh that with if this is an area which has traditionally been open space, then all right, yes, I understand the desire to enclose it, although that is a fairly substantial change to how the area feels to other residents. So that one I'm a little bit less certain, but the extension I'm actually not too bothered by.
Councillor Rain.
I agree with someone. I disagree with the motion. I think the trouble with it is they can make beautiful homes. And I think it's a determination to keep the heritage side of it. It's there as far as the architecture is concerned, and the inverted commas new build site would accommodate everything else about dividing the chapel up. I agree with the request. Right.
Does anyone have any further to say on this? Shall we take a vote? So we have a motion to refuse the application on the grounds of harm to heritage in particular. I think that's broadly correct.
Yeah.
So all those in favour of the motion to refuse? Those against? Okay, that motion fails. So that motion has failed, so I call for a new motion on this application. If none are forthcoming, then it's my role as chair to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation on this application. That would normally be seconded by my vice chair. My vice chair is not here, so I will need a seconder from the room. Councillor Orson, thank you very much. So we now have a motion to approve this application. I open the floor to debate. Please, Councillor James.
I mean, it is a balance, isn't it, as to how you feel about the opportunity to do something to preserve the building and whether you feel that that's outweighing any harm to the heritage. I'm afraid I'm still sitting on the more harm than good side at the moment, so I will not be supporting this motion.
I agree, it's on balance, and it's a difficult one, and there is concern around particularly this extension, though I must say I tend to come down with Councillor Orson is on this in terms of the extension being a viable living space that won't do substantial harm. I also interestingly grew up living in a chapel, so I know they come in. So that is not biasing this decision. I think actually the thing that I was most concerned about weirdly was the fence, and I totally understand the neighbours' concerns around this. But ultimately, we can't condition any form of planting. Wrought iron is so much better than sort of a closed-off space. It is reasonable that someone who owns a property might want to enclose a space. I think if it was all 1.8 around it, it'd be too much. The Heritage Office says it's okay now. So on balance, I'll be supporting the motion.
Further to the point of the fence, I personally would prefer it to be lower, but not so strongly that I feel I can not approve this proposal.
Is there any further debate on this? In that case, I'm going to say that we take a vote on this. So we have a motion to approve the officer recommendation on the non-listed building consent application. All those in favour? Those against? That is approved. 4-3. So now I call for a motion on the listed building application. Can I have a motion on the listed building application? Councillor Watson.
All right. On the listed building, I move that we go with the officer's recommendation to approve.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rayner. I open the floor to debate. Does anyone wish to say anything? If no debate's forthcoming, I'll suggest we take a vote on this. So all those in favour of accepting the listed building consent? Those against? That's 5-2, and that is approved. Okay. So thank you very much. That is our final item this evening. It just leaves me to say thank you to all of our speakers, thank you to all of our officers, and thank you, committee, for some good and lively debate on these applications. And with that, I ask for the live stream to be ended.